Hi, I'm Ricky Kennedy. You know, discouragement is bad enough, but the thing that I hate about it is that it just keeps coming back. It goes away, but sooner or later it sneaks back in. Sometimes it can even grow and turn into depression and take us completely out of the game. So we have to be on our guard against discouragement. That's what we're going to be talking about today. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is how God helped someone who is facing a heavy dose of discouragement. And you might be surprised about how God handled it. It's typically not what we think of. In 1 Kings 18, the prophet Elijah basically just had the highlight of his career. He has this showdown with the false prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, and a lot of people see it. Those prophets were trying to call down fire from heaven and nothing happened. But Elijah calls to God and God sends fire from heaven. The people see it, they fall down on their faces and they're declaring that the Lord is God. The prophets of Baal are seized, and then right after that, it hadn't rained in years, and then Elijah prays and then God sends the rain. And so Elijah is seeing just God do some great big victories. But then in 1 Kings 19, Queen Jezebel hears about this, and she wants to put an end to Elijah's life. And in verse 3, even though Elijah, he's shown himself to be a man of faith, a man of courage, a man who trusts God, right there because of Queen Jezebel, he's afraid. Verse 4, it says, "But he went on a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die." So Elijah comes to God and he's like, "I've had enough. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors." And think about this. Elijah, the previous chapter, he just prayed for fire to come down from heaven. He prayed for rain when it hadn't rained in years. And now he's telling God, "I can't do this anymore." Many times our big lows, they come after these big highs. So I love God's response to this discouraged Elijah. Verse 5, "Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. All at once an angel touched him and said, 'Get up and eat.' Elijah looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay down again." Notice, God doesn't reprimand Elijah. He doesn't say, "Hey, what's wrong with you?" and then give him a lot of correction and some big pep talk. What God did is that he gave Elijah food and water, and then he let him take another nap. Sometimes when we're really discouraged, it's good to just stop and ask yourself, am I off in some basic ways? Many times we're just not taking good care of ourselves. Do I need some sleep? Do I need a shower? Do I need some food? And God meets Elijah right there in this place. Elijah's tired, he's anxious, he's discouraged, and God meets his practical needs. And this happens a second time, and then later Elijah, he goes to a cave and he voices his frustrations with God. And in verse 11, the Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. We all love to see God work in dramatic ways, and sometimes God does do that, but often God works in smaller ways. And this is a reminder to Elijah back then, but also to us today, that in our discouragement, God is right there with us. He sees us, he cares for us in those times. And also it's a reminder that those big displays that so many times that we want God to come in and show his power. We want God to fix everything, but many times it's just not how God works. He just shows up in the everyday, the small things, and meets us in our situation. And it reminds us that God's whispering to the human heart is more powerful. When we hear God's voice in those intimate moments, we're reminded of his promises, we're reminded of who he is. So today, if you're discouraged, seek to hear God's voice through prayer, through scripture, and remember that God is at work. Even if you don't see him, God is at work in the small, everyday things that we don't always see. So now, go win today.